Do you guys think that if the Champions League format hadn't changed and those teams dropped to Europa League, do you think we would even be seeing these two teams in the Europa League final this year?
No.
Absolutely
not.
Without a doubt.
Pressure's
No, but that's not their fault.
No, it's not. They've controlled what they can control, and this is the new format. So I think what we anticipated was bigger clubs who have a bigger bankroll, who can spend on the best players. Those clubs had an advantage. Tottenham were one of the favorites coming into this competition, and same for Manchester United, and they're both in the final. But their league form doesn't reflect that. I don't want to take anything away from Manchester United because in Europa League, they're unbeaten. They're the only team unbeaten throughout the whole calendar year in the Europa League.
They're the only unbeaten team in all of Europe, yes. Manchester United.
So from that standpoint, there's something to be said.
Successful.
All right, Charlie. Well, something to be said for them, something to be said as well for Tottenham. Let's break down these two teams, and you're going to tell me who has the edge over the other.
Yes.
And we're going to start off with, in the attack, who's got the edge, Tottenham or Manchester United?
Well, between two teams, the best player on the pitch for either, the best player is Bruno Fernandes. With Bruno, I give the edge to Manchester United. Now, Tottenham have Solanke, that Brennan Johnson, and whether it's Sonny or Richarlison, we don't know what the health is.
No Maddison is a big miss for them.
I'm giving Manchester United that. And look, Højlund is a player who struggled, but he's found a way to be impactful as of late. And it's usually with hard work, hold-up play, good runs. And Ruben Amorim has said he's finally starting to get the best out of him in terms of his work rate and how he can help the team.
Yep. You guys agree with that? You would give me the edge.
I think with Bruno, yeah, that's all you have to say. He's carried the team.
Just to give a little example with analysis in terms of Bruno, he leads the Premier League, number one in the Premier League with key passes, with through balls and progressive passes. He's number one in the whole entire Premier League.
The way that Bruno operates, he's a step above the rest of the players in this final.
Mm-hmm. All right, so agreement here. What about midfield? Who's got the edge there, Charlie?
I'm going to go with Manchester United again. I look at the midfield for Tottenham, and it's Kulusevski, Basuma, and Bentancur is what we saw in this last fixture. Versus a Ugarte, a Casemiro, because they play with the two, and then if you want to throw in, Menu, I'm going to give it to Manchester United in that edge as well. I just think the experience is overwhelmingly favoring Manchester United with Casemiro. I just think that with Ugarte and Casemiro, they finally have something. You can even throw in a Mason Mount in there.
Yep.
Kobe Mainoo is a good person to come off the bench. I will give the edge to Manchester United.
Especially with no Maddison for Tottenham. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Nico, you agree with that?
Yeah. Casemiro with the experience, I think Casemiro's been very questioned. For some reason, Real Madrid got rid of him. He wasn't at that height of his powers, and I think he had a hard time adapting to Premier League football, and he's finally found his rhythm, found his groove with Manchester United, paired with Ugarte, who also kind of struggled. Ugarte wasn't good at the beginning when he arrived at Manchester United. And remember, Ugarte played under Ruben Amorim in his system at Sporting. So I think they found that balance, giving that midfield a little bit of bite, and then pair that all with Bruno. There's an understanding there that they're starting to get to that gives this team, again, going back to that personality. Sometimes they're lifeless in the Prem, and it's like, really? And then they turn it up here.
But this is where it gets interesting, Claudia, because now we're going to look at the back line. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give the advantage to Tottenham.
Kuti!
I knew you loved Romero, but Manchester United, you don't feel any sort of security or safety when you're talking about the back line of Manchester United. So I think we're starting to see Tottenham change a little bit tactically of how they set up, knowing that we can't be exposed all the time. We can't always play high. And because of that, they're in the Europa League final. So Mickey Van de Ven and Romero, I think Pedro Porro, who is number one in the Premier League with crosses, he gets constantly up and down the flank. I think Udogi's another solid defender. He's not going to give you too much in the attacking phase of play, but recovery speed, tough tackler. I'm going to give it to the edge
Jed
to Tottenham.
Spence has also been quite the revelation in the Europa League. It's funny because, like, we want to give these guys flowers, but over the entire season, it's not been good. Romero and Van de Ven have been injured for large portions of the season, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why Spurs has been doing so poorly domestically too.
All right, Charlie, how about goalkeepers? Round it out for us here.
I'm gonna
Good
give.
question.
It is a good question. I'm going to give it to Onana. He, for all of the controversy around Onana, I think he is a little bit more up for these big moments. He has more clean sheets. I think he has a better save percentage, more saves than Vicario. I just feel. Yes, he's capable of that.
That's not Vicario's fault, though.
No, that one.
How many shots is he facing versus Vicario?
Agreed.
I think he still he has more saves.
He's facing more shots. I think that speaks of how bad the defense is.
For Onana.
Yeah,
100%. I'm gonna give the edge to Onana.
Wait, why is you saying in bigger moments? Because we see him in big moments give the ball away in key areas.
Has Vicario played in the Champions League final?
You have that.
Yeah,
But in recent form?
He had a phenomenal performance for Inter Milan all the way to the end of the Champions League final, in which he also played extremely well, which led him to this move.
That Onana
it's a
is
different-
not this Onana.
No, but we've seen hints of just how good he is. Now, it hasn't
That
been
Onana looked like
consistent.
Beckenbauer playing out of the back with his feet. I don't know where that went after Manchester United.
How can you play that with this Manchester United side?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Listen, I think Vicario's a top goalkeeper, and for a goalkeeper, there's just so much noise around Onana at the moment in a final. It feels like everyone's waiting for that Onana mistake to just hammer him for some reason because there has been a lot of noise created, and Vicario has had excellent moments as well throughout his Spurs career.
You're splitting hairs.
And I totally agree that we're splitting hairs. For me personally, I as a shot-stopping goalkeeper, if I had to pick one, I would actually go with Vicario.
All right, finally, managers, Charlie. Where are you going with here?
This is a better question than a goalkeeper.
You can't base it off of their post-match comments and what they said.
I wish.
I know. I think at this moment, I'm going to go Ruben Amorim.
Why?
I think there's a little bit more positivity towards the future, towards this project. I think he's finally understood who he can trust in the team. I think there's less question marks for him as opposed to Ange Postecoglou, where I think he's finally adapting his methods tactically.
But after all this time?
I just don't feel confident in Ange Postecoglou to make those changes in a game.
Who do you think has more buy-in, the Manchester United players with Amorim or the Spurs players with Ange?
Ruben Amorim.
I think after last game, Amorim, for sure.
Both Lyon and this one.
Yeah.
It's the momentum that's building towards something. And to complete that story, they need to win this game. They both do, but you feel that if Manchester United are to fulfill this man's potential, to give them the best shot at Champions League glory and competing in the Premier League, they need to win this title. And it feels like there's a little bit of a revolution happening, and they need to close the chapter and win.
He's also always been in reality with where they're at and where they need to go, whereas Ange, a lot of the time, I adore him. Ange, a lot of the time, I think, is saying things that even your face when we're listening to him is like, where are you pulling this from?
Yeah, almost justifying the poor results.
Yeah.
Sometimes almost sounding a little bit speaking with delusion, right?
Yes.
And to make your point even further, it just feels like this is pure speculation, right? It feels like if United loses this final, they're going to stick with Amorim without a doubt. Mm-hmm. If Spurs loses the final, it just feels like
Even if
they're
they
going to move
win,
on
it
from
feels
Ange.
like they
even
win.
if they win.
So that tells you enough.